Hello, ladies and littlemen, welcome to my channel. If you've been watching for a while, you know that around Halloween I like to do some spooky videos. So today we are talking about seances. Are they scams? Historically, yes, but maybe not always. I do want to say one thing before I start this video, which is I am both a skeptic and a believer at the same time. I do think there are probably ghosts. If you want to think I'm crazy and click off, that's fine. I don't blame you. But I also think that most mediums and seances are a lot of hullabaloo. And I think that it would be very difficult for me to just be immediately convinced that a seance would be real based on my experience with supernatural things. Like, I feel like most of these people are con artists. If you or someone you love is a psychic medium and can contact ghosts or spirits, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I feel like as a medium, you've got to recognize that historically there have been a lot of scams in the seance industry, and that's what we're talking about today. Kicking it all the way back to beginning of time, 0 AD, there have always been psychics and spiritualists who claim that they can contact ghosts, spirits, demons, what have you. That's nothing new, but the modern seance was originally kind of curated in 1848. In Hydesville, New York, there were two sisters, Maggie, 14 years old, and Kate, 11 years old, Fox. Now, it's crazy to think that the modern seance was invented by two teenagers. Like, that's... These two sisters in New York in the 1800s believed that they started hearing knockings and rappings, as they called them, on the doors and walls of their home. Claimed to first their parents and then to other news outlets that they were hearing the communications of spirits. Now, they actually had a third sister named Leah who was like, hey, hold on, I want in on this action too. And she actually scheduled them meetings with journalists and media outlets to basically schedule these tours where her younger sisters Maggie and Kate would perform live seances. The word seance itself means to feel or to perceive. It's a Latin word that was first originating in the 14th century, which is really interesting to me how the first recorded seance wasn't until 1848. That is actually a lot more recent than what I would consider this to be. Like, I would think that seances would be a very primitive thing. However, there likely were seances before the Fox sisters. This was just the first publicized type seance, which is probably where we're getting this information. So 1848, we start having these three sisters traveling around and doing live performance seances, and it's basically like Charlie and Dixie D'Amelio, only instead of TikTok dances, it's more so along the lines of Madame Leota from the Haunted Mansion. It wasn't until nearly 4 decades later, in 1888, that Maggie Fox confessed that the entire seance rappings that they were experiencing were all a sham. They were achieving these rapping sounds by cracking their knuckles and even their toes on the wooden floorboards and on furniture under the tables, etc., which I really feel like that should have been obvious. Imagine you're making a living off of cracking your knuckles in the dark. That's a very niche chiropractor type occupation, I would say. So they confessed, but they kept touring because at the end of the day, people want ghosts and people want the comfort and the mystery and the intrigue that they experience from seances. So they continued to be very successful mediums, I guess you would say, even despite people knowing that they had confessed that the entire ordeal was fake. As spiritualism grew throughout the Victorian period in London, England, and the rest of the UK, these scammer mediums started doing more elaborate tricks such as table tipping, slate writing, materializations, which included lots of different special effects and lighting tricks similar to Pepper's Ghost and other things like that, even recreating ectoplasm, which was often made of animal parts. Now we're going to enter a very famous historical figure that you've probably heard of, Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini was an illusionist and magician who performed lots of mind-boggling escape tricks and other acts of magic live during this time period. And you might think that Harry Houdini would be all for this like mysticism and think like, wow, this would be a really cool way to expand my business. I mean, that's what I would probably think if I was Harry Houdini. But actually, after losing his mother, Harry Houdini was sick of scammer mediums profiting off of people's deaths. After his mother died, Harry Houdini was deeply distraught as he was very, very close to her. So he went to seances in order to maybe get answers from her or contact her in order to feel more comfort. But what he found was scam after scam, and eventually he got sick of it. For a period of time, Harry Houdini basically made it his life's mission to expose as many scam mediums as possible. Some common tricks that scammer mediums used that he exposed included the knocking. The Fox sisters started it, Houdini ended it. He exposed it for cracking knuckles and large poles underneath furniture, reaching up and knocking on furniture and things like that, that once the lights came on, it became obvious that there were some obvious knockers in the room. I sounded kind of bad. Maybe I should cut that. Next was levitation or table tilting, which was a huge Victorian-era crowd pleaser. Houdini exposed that these tricks were often created with wires and other methods of leverage, and some mediums even used their knees to manipulate the table by pushing their knees up against the top of the table, which was concealed by a tablecloth. After Houdini removed the tablecloth, in many instances, most of the mediums were not able to get a response from the spirits, which kind of broke the illusion. Oftentimes, magnets beneath the table were used to move objects like Ouija boards, candles, and other objects of significance, and that was discovered by Houdini as well. And lastly, spirit photography, which is when spirits would mysteriously show up and developed photos. Houdini pretty much debunked this as well, showing that these could be created with double exposure or by placing cutouts of people over the negatives prior to them being developed. How did Harry Houdini debunk this one? He actually took a photo of himself, and in a mirror, Abraham Lincoln appears with the famous illusionist, and he kind of published this to show how easily photos could be manipulated, especially using all sorts of techniques during the developmental process, and unless you see the photo being developed in real time, it can be extremely easily manipulated. What made this an act of revenge on Harry Houdini's part is absolutely crazy, because he didn't just debunk these scam mediums. He performed magic tricks that were much more elaborate and mind-boggling than they could even do. Audience saw that a real magician could fake ghosts with a lot simpler tools and a lot less flair, which caused many people to doubt the credibility of mediums in general. And his feud with mediums ran deep. True believers in the paranormal, like Arthur Conan Doyle, got actually vicious, claiming that Houdini was in the same league as Satan, and that Houdini wasn't actually a magician that was trying to debunk mediums, but he was actually unknowingly psychic or possessed. Me, when the ops hate on me so hard that I make up a rumor that they're just possessed by demons and they aren't aware of it. If you want to know more about how Houdini debunked more of these scam mediums, you can read all about it in his book, which is called A Magician Among Spirits, where he in detail shows how he debunked hundreds of medium tricks. Harry Houdini was the original Ghostbuster, only instead of ghosts, he caught phonies. But if these seances were so easily debunked, it really doesn't explain why so many people believed in them and still believe in them to this day. The answer to that may be rooted more so in psychology than it was spiritualism. If we think back to the spiritualism craze of the 1800s, in Europe and in the UK, we were in the Victorian period, and in the United States, we were with the very dramatic Gone with the Wind era, if you know what I'm saying. And death itself was really romanticized. Long, theatrical, periodical times of mourning for when your loved ones pass away. Funerals were an extremely huge deal. They did death photography. Overall, death and the events surrounding it were pretty much a testament to how much you were devoted to the departed. These scam mediums were often able to create a type of liminal space for these seances. The room would be darkened, mysterious, more elaborate language would be used, and people would get this feeling of uncanniness when they would enter these seance spaces that would already prep them to think that something mysterious is going to happen. Then there was the factor of grief bias, which is basically when people want to believe and those beliefs are rooted in a powerful emotion like grief or sadness or depression, you are more likely to be persuaded by the effects of something that otherwise would seem pretty mundane. So yeah, yeah, if you enter this dark, macabre room where this medium is being very mystical and pulling out these metaphysical tools that you've never seen and trying to communicate in ways that you've never heard of and you're unfamiliar with, you might believe something just because you aren't familiar with the tactics behind those theatrical practices, but it still doesn't explain why people are still influenced by scam mediums today. Now, here's where I'm going to get a little bit controversial. Do I think there are some people that are deeply in tune with the supernatural? Absolutely. I think some people are definitely more in tune with the supernatural and spiritual realms than I am. However, I do not believe world famous medium, in fact Long Island medium, Teresa Caputo is. I think she may be in tune with spirits, but the way that she capitalizes on grief is kind of crazy, and after watching several of her shows, I think we can kind of delve into why people are so influenced by popular mediums like her. Mediums like Teresa Caputo use what are called cold statements, where they ask these blanket, very generalized statements like, I'm seeing an older woman. Okay, everybody has an older woman in their family who has passed away. Like, that's really not that deep. And then she feeds off of the interviewee's expressions and emotions and kind of guess how they can emotionally manipulate the interviewee, essentially. In some cases, she'll say, before she even picks a participant, some kind of statement like, I'm getting a sense of someone who died in a really violent death, and then she uses the crowd's emotions and expressions to pick a volunteer based on who reacted to that statement. Mediums who practice in these especially large audience settings, like Teresa, have a little something on their side in the psychology world known as group psychology. Crowds feed off of each other, and if other people in the crowd believe in something, you're more likely to feel influenced by that as well. It's this type of confirmation bias to where if other people are thinking it's real, then you're more likely to think that it's real too, especially in a setting where emotions are high and all of these people are going to this show in order to get some kind of closure. And when you think about it, grief is the perfect business model because you already have these people who are desperate for answers, and you can't sue them for getting a mental image and then charging you $120 to tell them exactly what they want to hear. So there we went into a little bit of the history of seances and scam mediums. And if a medium can do all of that, imagine what a large could do. Oh my god, that was stupid. My name is Melody, and I do little teeny tiny deep dives on all things freaky, geeky, and spooky, so if that sounds like something that would interest you, maybe flip over to my channel and check me out. I would really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, leave me a comment. If you hated this video, also leave me a comment. Again, I am not trying to expose anyone and say that these people are all scammers. I really do think that some people are more in tune with the spiritual realm. It's just not me. It's just not me. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know. Until next time, I'll catch you in the next one, hopefully.